Another year, another March of the Toter Drones. Except this time, I actually went ahead and got the 2 remaining agent shells I needed to finally craft one of the Tortofists for the first time. So this video is for you, Sax the Alien. Alan. Sorry about the 2-year wait. I need help with my procrastination. The very moment I crafted the 3-star Tortofist and shot it, I knew this thing was going to be terrible. And to really nobody's surprise, yeah, I was right. See, I ended up crafting the Grand Tortofist, arguably my first mistake, but I did it less for the damage typing, and more so to see how the weapon actually felt to use. This ended up being quite a discussion I had with several friends I was playing with whilst using it, which showed it was a bit of a multifaceted topic. There are a plethora of problems that hold this weapon back from feeling good enough to use and being competent. A lack of identity in any specific role, if you will. Remember just a second ago when I said, the very moment I crafted the 3-star Tortofist and shot it, I knew this thing was going to be terrible. Yeah, that wasn't for shits and giggles. The Tortofist's primary attacks are quite clunky and unwieldy to use. So much so that I opted to get a 3rd weapon slot just to not use it whenever I didn't have to or I felt like it. To explain, the primary attack consists of 2 parts. There's the lunge forward part of the attack, which I'll explain my thoughts on here in a moment. Then shortly after the lunge, the gun's projectile shoots out and, yes, this is a gun, believe it or not. Both components of the primary attack deal damage, which is nice. It operates much like a Tourbillon in the fact that you have a melee attack and a projectile attack. This is particularly nice for specialized gunner builds which, well, make full use of builds with handgun-based bonuses and the variety of different handguns out there. The issues, as I said a while ago, is this shit's clunky to use. One of the biggest strengths that handguns have over both swords and bombs is that you have maneuverability and superior positioning. While some guns do keep you in place during the duration of attack, like the autogun lines, generally keeping your distance will be adequate enough for most threats that try to maul you. This is where I have a problem with the primary attack for the Tortofist. The lunge, as I said, lunges you forward, which is rather counterintuitive to the ideology of gameplay, especially for a game like Spiral Knights. It's not just that. The lunge feels very slippery and has some serious end lag to it when trying to doing anything else afterwards. It's an incredibly uncomfortable feeling and requires some getting used to before you can really feel safe using its primary attacks. It's like it wants to act like a flourish for its lunge, but lacks all the precision and speed necessary to be useful, especially for any other action required afterwards, like a shield cancel into another weapon per se. That, but the projectile has its own problem. The range of the projectile is absolutely pitiful. I don't think most people really pay attention to projectile range or even bat an eye at it when it's slightly less than usual, but it's damn noticeable with the Tortofist that it's hard to really use as a gun properly. Combined all together, this weapon's primary attack is just complete garbage with how it feels to use, which is a shame because the damage really isn't that terrible. It clashes with the idea that it wants to be a handgun-based Tourbillon, but fails on that front due to the nature of handguns. Its lunge is reminiscent of the Flourish, but fails to understand why Flourish's lunge works. However, some handguns aren't always renowned for their primary attacks. Some are renowned for... Easily the better use case scenario of the Tortofist is by speccing into its charge attack capabilities, as it shines much better than what we saw already. The charge attack proceeds to shoot 6 crystals into the sky, which lands on the ground in a random cluster shortly after. Contrary to the wiki, the crystals deal damage to an enemy about 4 to 5 times before no longer doing so, similarly to a barrier pickup. The crystals are also an impassable object to enemies, acting as an unreliable form of hard crowd control. Enemies will try to walk around it instead of through, so it's important to be aware of that. Crystals are also passable to players, allowing for easy escape or repositioning. Overall, pretty good sounding, if not slightly inconsistent. Me bomba! However, there are still many problems with the charge attack. The obvious one is that the crystals drop in a random cluster rather than any specific formation or pattern. This can be manipulated a little bit by facing a wall so that all the crystals spawn alongside the wall, but that's not always entirely useful. The actual problem with the charge attack that hampers it from having potential to be viable is when the crystals stop dealing damage to monsters after 4 to 5 damage ticks. It's rather strange that the charge attack has this because it's about the only handgun, nay, weapon in the game that has this downside. Whereas other weapons are known for being literal nukes, like the Iron Slug or Blister Needle, that don't have anything even remotely like this. Was this done because they thought it would be too strong? Did they think the hard CC was good enough? Did they want less focus on the charge attack itself? We can't say anything if any of these questions were the case, or even if it's for these reasons at all. Maybe it was a new and unique design philosophy that never got around to being implemented for newer weapons. Whatever the case may be, the damage tick limit really ruins any beacon of hope this weapon had for consistent gameplay use. While I think the developers preferred the idea of a weapon to be balanced around both its charge attack and primary attack, some weapons are just better for one or the other. Alchemers and Blasters are incredible primary attack handguns. Magnuses and autoguns are some of the best charge attack weapons in the game. And the Tortofist doesn't fit into either category. Despite everything said, there's little to no point in making a video criticizing Tortofists if I don't suggest ideas to buff them. And in fairness, they desperately need it too. There are many ways to buff the Tortofist depending on how you want the handgun to operate. As you can probably pick up on, I like the idea of the Tortofist being a charged attack focused weapon. So many of my suggestions will lean into buffing the charge attack to actually being useful and niche fulfilling. But before we do that, I do have some general level suggestions for the primary attack to at least make it less wonky to control. Those suggestions are the ones I had already brought up before, and it's to fix the lunge and the projectile's max distance. The lunge, as I have gone into detail, has an unusually slippery and long end lag. Obviously, the easiest and best thing to do is to make the lunge cleaner and sharper so that it's less like slipping on a wet spot from a mop. The lunge may be extremely unwieldy because it's a heavy weapon, but that doesn't make it a fun handgun because of it. And the aspect of gameplay should be favored over loosely intended realism. Secondly, increase the projectile's range at least to a decent enough distance. Simple as that, nothing crazy. I have many ideas for the Tortofist charge attack, with some being rather simple and some being rather radical. There's not really one perfect way to buff this charge attack, so any of these could be a good start on how to make the Tortofist better. 1. Remove the damage tick limiter. Plain and simple. Enemies that are on top of the crystal shouldn't stop taking damage after a certain point. It's needless and only hinders the Tortofist's potentiality. I think this in of itself will already make the handgun much better should nothing else be taken to buff it. 2. This one would lead in greatly, with the first suggestion would even work from a lore standpoint. And it's to give the charge attack the ability to possibly inflict minor shock on contact. This would allow enemies to be further CC'd, and if they're shocked directly onto the crystal, they'll be taking damage for quite a while. I can see this being a bit far, and honestly it wouldn't be a bad suggestion alone if it weren't to be paired with the damage tick limiter. It also finally gives us our first shock piercing weapon in the game. 3. If neither option, then I think the idea of crystals having a pulsing attack for the duration of their existence could be a neat idea. It would give the charge attack some extra AoE to hit nearby enemies should they get knocked back from the crystals or try to walk away from it. The pulsing attack should be less frequent than the current crystal damage tick rate as a way to compensate for its increased damage radius. And lastly, 4. Have the crystals land in a loose, shape-like pattern. This will make the charge attack much more predictable and easier to use against enemies. While I don't mind and actually kind of like the randomness of the crystal clusters, it could be extremely frustrating to work with due to its uncertainty. I think these would be the best and most interesting changes that could be applied to the Tortofists. I'm certain there are other ways to go about buffing it, so if you have any ideas yourself, feel free to leave a comment down below talking about it and why. These are all the things I've learned about the Tortofist ever since I began editing this video. Honestly, this gun just sucks against extremely agile enemies like fiends, spookats, wolvers, and even gremlins sometimes. You've seen the footage in the background. They're all just too nimble for how slow this gun operates to even be remotely viable against them. This may be because I'm using the Grand Tortofist, but these handguns are so slow and hard to work with that it's literally not worth using when there's a Silkwing or Gremlin Mender on the field. Just switch to another weapon. The Tortofist actually has a janky hitbox. This means that trying to hit small stationary targets, like a gun puppy, deals less damage if you're right up in its face, like in this clip here. Lastly, and most frustratingly, if you use a charge attack with the Tortofist, it forces you to do a primary attack and reload animation if you want to go straight into another charge attack. From what I have learned, only this and the Antigua lines do this, and I wonder if this is a bug or intentional design. This alone makes the handgun extremely clunky and hard to recommend because of it. I think, on top of everything else, changing this to be more in line with other guns should be on the top of the list because it would remedy you having to fight the system for what should be instincts and understanding in terms of gunplay in Spiral Knights. The Tortofists are very much a weapon that is extremely lackluster in its gameplay design and really lacks the identity of a weapon with a certified and defined role, on top of elements on its general use feeling either clunky and difficult to work with. The Tortofists desperately need a buff for it to see a lot more use outside of randomizer runs and messing around with, which is a bit of a shame because it's got an incredible visual design and an extremely unique combat style. Despite it all, it really doesn't fit a good niche and kind of steps on the toes of many weapons that it either fails to compete with or draws inspiration from. Who knows though? With Greyhaven's recent changes and buffs to the Neutralizer and Dracon, we could see a future where we do get a Tortofist buff and see it become a viable weapon in the future with an identity of its own to stand on. If you have any thoughts or ideas you want to talk about when it comes to the Tortofists, make sure to leave a comment down below. With that, I'd like to bid you guys farewell. Bye bye.